Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
It was the first day when Marta decided to live a full life. Enough. I'm a woman, only 35, and I have the right to happiness, she thought, opening a travel agency website. For the first time in 3 years, she decided to allow herself to relax a little and go on a week-long vacation to some warm place with her son. Bright images of tours flashed before her eyes. She couldn't decide for a long time. She wanted everything at once. After scrolling through endless all-inclusive offers in India and Portugal, Marta settled on Thailand. She used to fly there often during her student years, first with friends, and then with her family, her son Daniel and her husband. Marta met Basilio when she was only 25. Tall, wealthy, handsome, young, with a mole under his chin. The girl immediately lost control of herself and decided to tie her life to this man. The first period was like something out of cheap novels: travels, flowers, endless happiness, a child. But a year after Daniel's birth, everything gradually began to change. Basilio stopped coming home from work on time, stayed there until midnight. His business trips turned into monthly journeys, usually to some warm countries. Marta firmly pushed away the thought of a mistress, but Basilio gave her more and more reasons to doubt. Conversations led to nothing. The husband adamantly denied everything. Despite this, Marta continued to love him. She asked Basilio to stay home more often, at least for the sake of Daniel, but he didn't pay much attention to their son either, just gave money to Marta and disappeared. One evening he disappeared again, but this time forever. Almost every day Marta mentally returned to that fateful day, replayed every minute in her memory, and at first cried, then the strength to cry ran out. She barely held back from showing her despair and sadness to Daniel, for whom his dad was still on a long business trip. Yesterday, Marta firmly decided that she was going through this scenario in her head for the last time. On that February evening, for the third day in a row, Marta walked around the apartment with the phone in her hand. Basilio had left on a business trip and was supposed to return 3 days ago. His phone was unavailable. He didn't respond to messages. "Mom, why are you so sad?" her 5-year-old son Daniel asked. "Me? I'm not sad. Why aren't you sleeping yet?" The boy sighed, turned around, and went to his bed. Daniel didn't know that something had happened to his dad. Basilio rarely talked to him anyway, and in the last 6 months, he hadn't even entered his room, so the father's absence didn't change anything in his usual child's life. Marta called the company where her husband worked as a managing partner. Basilio said they were opening new facilities, so he had to fly there. She managed to contact the company's CEO. "Hello, Alberto," she said excitedly. She had participated in the company's corporate events several times before and was familiar with the director. "I want to inquire about my husband's business trip. Do you know how everything is going there? You see, I can't reach Basilio. He was supposed to be home for 3 days now." "What business trip?" the director exclaimed. "Marta, do you know what you're talking about?" "What?" The woman almost dropped the phone. "Aren't you opening a new plant?" "We have no new plants, and there are no plans for any. And Basilio informed me that he's taking a 2-week vacation at his own expense." "Marta, I really don't understand what you're talking about." "Vacation?" "Thank you," Marta whispered and hung up the phone. She slowly sat down on the couch and covered her face with her hands. Basilio's lies had crossed all reasonable boundaries this time. If before he had somehow tried to cover up his excuses, now he had simply decided not to come home, turning off his phone. Enduring this further was beneath all dignity. Of course, she should have left earlier, even at the first hints of an affair, but for the sake of Daniel, Marta stayed with Basilio. Her husband could provide a comfortable life, education, and travels for the child, and leaving Basilio would mean that Marta would have to raise her child and work at the same time. It was unclear how long she could endure this kind of routine, and what it would do to Daniel. Although, of course, that wasn't the only reason Marta refused to leave her husband. She still loved him, despite Basilio's repugnant behavior. But now she needed to gather herself. Enough of this humiliation. Many women leave and manage to raise even several children on their own. And Marta will definitely manage with Daniel. These thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. For some reason, Alberto was calling back. "Marta, it's me again." "Well, someone called me." "Yes, Basilio is indeed on a business trip, not at a plant." The director spoke quickly and hesitantly. "I think it's better not to talk about this over the phone. Maybe I can come over to you now?" Marta agreed. She quickly tidied up as best as she could and started waiting for Alberto. Basilio's company office was a 10-minute drive from home, so the doorbell rang very soon. After exchanging greetings, the director entered the apartment. He and Marta sat on the couch and remained silent for about 15 seconds. The director seemed unable to find the right words, not knowing where to start. "Marta," he began, taking a deep breath, "well, Basilio, he went to Norway to ride snowmobiles on the ice. They often go there, Basilio and his friends." Often, Marta continued to be surprised by the new revelations about her husband's personal life. "Yes, but that's not the point right now. Right after your call, a colleague came into my office and conveyed some information from Norway. There's been a slight warming there recently, and, of course, snowmobiling is prohibited under such conditions, but what? Just tell me already." Marta couldn't hold back. But Basilio still decided to go down onto the ice and fell through. "How can this be?" The woman paled. "Marta, is something wrong with you? Should I call an ambulance?" Alberto asked anxiously. "No need. Is he dead?" "The thing is, it didn't happen on the actual lake, but on a river nearby. There was a strong underwater current, so they haven't been able to find Basilio's body yet. But the rescuers say there's no chance they'll find Basilio alive." It felt like a blow to the head for Marta. Just 15 minutes ago, she was cursing Basilio, determined to leave him. And now she learns that he's gone. Marta stared into emptiness. Before her, like in an old silent movie, flashed scenes from their life together. Alberto went to the kitchen, brought a glass of water for the woman. "But I promise," Director Alberto tried to console Marta, "the company will assist you with the inheritance and all legal matters." "But how is that possible if they still haven't found Basilio? What if he's still alive?" "It happens. A person can be declared dead even without finding the body. I understand your reluctance to accept this loss, but I've been assured that there was no chance of rescuing Basilio." "I'm sorry." Marta was no longer listening to Alberto's words. Tears flowed from her eyes like a stream. She didn't understand how she could go on now. Gathering herself a bit, she saw Alberto out and sat down in the kitchen. "Mom, why are you crying?" Marta didn't notice that Daniel had entered the kitchen. "What? I'm not crying. My eyes are just watering. Why are you not sleeping again? I heard you talking to some uncle. That's a man from Daddy's work." "Where's Daddy?" "Well, Daddy," Marta fell silent. She didn't know what to say next. She didn't want to tell her 5-year-old son about his father's death, and telling him that he went to heaven was also difficult. So, Marta decided to delay the conversation at least until the next time Daniel asked about his father. Daddy is on another trip, as usual, only this time he'll be away a bit longer. What is he doing there? Daniel was at an age when children ask endless questions, and now it was especially hard for Marta to answer these questions. He's exploring new worlds, mountains, lakes, seas. Well, he works and travels. I want to explore new worlds too. You'll grow up and explore everything you want. And now it's time for you to go to bed. You know, a person grows the most in their sleep. So, the sooner you go to bed, the faster you'll grow. Come on, go to bed." The boy approached the door, but suddenly stopped, turned around, and asked a question he had never asked throughout Basilio's business trips. "When will Daddy come back?" "I don't know." Marta struggled to hold back her tears and not cry in front of the child. "Not anytime soon. He's on a complex and lengthy journey, dealing with difficult tasks. You can't discover a new world in a week, you understand. Daniel nodded and went to his room. For the first time in several years, Marta was even relieved that her husband paid little attention to the child. She couldn't even imagine how she would explain what happened to Daniel if Basilio had been an attentive and loving father. And now there was a possibility that the boy would eventually forget about his dad and wouldn't even ask. Of course, years from now, when Daniel becomes a teenager, she will have to tell the whole truth, but that's later. Right now, Marta's main goal was to preserve the child's mental well-being and not burden him with troubling news. But what about herself? Infidelity, second life, and all the other tricks of Basilio didn't make dealing with his death any easier. Marta had understood that she loved her husband before, but now it felt particularly acute. She was in a psychological dilemma. If at the moment she had decided to leave her husband, Marta could have drowned her feelings and attachment to him in anger and resentment, but now it wouldn't work. She couldn't be angry and resentful at someone who had left life. His betrayal seemed to have been erased from her memory. She only remembered positive moments from their relationship. Most of the happy minutes were from the beginning of their shared journey, and memories from those times now surged over Marta. She entered the room and took their family album from the shelf. After flipping through a few pages, Marta saw a photograph of her and Basilio sitting on a snowmobile together. Back then, he used to take her on all his trips and business travels, including snowmobile rides. He was a professional, he could drive a snowmobile blindfolded, Marta recalled, wiping her tears. How could he let such a terrible situation happen? It's so unlike him. No, it's not like him at all. I have to wait until they find the body. I can't believe this. She closed the album. She managed to regain her composure for just a few minutes, calming herself a bit, but then she felt an overwhelming bitterness again. Marta was able to hold back hysteria, only thinking about her son's peace. She wanted to run somewhere, to call, to shout, to sound the alarm, to demand that the search for her husband continue. She thought about calling Alberto again, but stopped herself in time. What would that achieve now? Marta wouldn't be able to influence the course of the search. Trying to convince someone that her husband couldn't have died so tragically because he was skilled at driving a snowmobile would be foolish. She gathered up and sat on the couch. Marta sat there and couldn't even think about anything. She wanted to fall asleep as soon as possible and wake up, as usual, watching her husband rush off to work, quietly saying goodbye and disappearing again for a few days. Marta took some sedative drops and lay down. She tossed and turned. Sleep wouldn't come. Marta mentally repeated to herself, "Hope and wait. Hope and wait." She didn't want to let go of her husband. Or rather, Marta was ready to let him go from the family, but she couldn't let go of Basilio from life altogether. The sedative began to take effect and Marta finally managed to fall asleep. With each passing day, hope and wait echoed less and less in her mind. Basilio was officially declared dead, although his body was never found. Alberto kept his promise, helped with inheritance matters, provided financial support, and arranged remote work at the firm. Marta managed to balance raising her child with earning a living. But she still couldn't let go of her husband. 3 years of actual mourning. Marta denied herself rest and entertainment, smiling only in her interactions with her son. He remained the sole purpose of her life. So, 3 years passed. On an internet webpage, a friendly girl smiled and held tickets in one hand and a sign that read "Happy Vacation for the whole family" in the other. Marta sighed heavily and clicked the buy button. "Daniel," Marta exclaimed loudly after the purchase. "We're going on vacation in a week." For 7 days, she prepared for the journey with her son, and these preparations were not so much about packing belongings as about accepting her new life psychologically, embracing her new identity. Not the identity of a grieving widow whom her husband had deceived for several years and then tragically lost, but the identity of a woman living a full life. Time flew by very quickly, and Marta didn't even notice how the week passed. It was time to head to the airport. After reaching it, she and Daniel sat in the waiting area. The last time Marta was at the airport was 5 years ago with Basilio when they sent their son to his grandmother and decided to spend a week relaxing in Turkey. Memories flooded back to Marta, but she managed to push them away. Marta took Daniel's hand, and in the endless stream of people, they headed toward the boarding gate. By the departure gate, there were already fewer people, and she and her son sat down right next to their gate. Marta glanced at her fellow passengers, also waiting for the flight. Most people seemed to be in a cheerful mood. Most of them were probably headed for a vacation. A group of young people laughed at some internet video. Two elderly women flipped through newspapers, the ones usually placed on stands in airports. Several rows away, a couple sat. A girl, a 25-year-old dyed blonde, and a man in a wide-brimmed hat and glasses. It was hard to determine the man's age because he was sitting, facing his companion and tilting his head slightly, so his face was fully obscured by the hat. The man was enthusiastically telling the girl something, but her expression didn't show any interest. She was glued to her phone and didn't react to his stories. Marta decided not to continue observing the engaging relationship between the man in the hat and his companion and shifted her attention to her phone. 15 minutes later, the announcer announced boarding. Marta and Daniel made their way to their seats. The boy took the window seat, and his mother sat next to him. "Daniel, this is your first conscious flight," his mother said to him joyfully. The last time they flew on a plane was when he was not even 2 years old. "It's so cool, Mom. How awesome that we're flying together. You probably don't even remember flying the last time?" Marta asked, and with horror realized that she shouldn't have asked that question. "Well," the boy, lost in thought, looked at the window. "No, I don't remember anything at all." Marta sighed with relief. She was worried that memories of his father might come to Daniel's mind. Over the past 3 years, the boy hardly remembered his dad, only asking about his trips to explore new worlds. Marta improvised stories on the spot about how his dad's group got stuck due to bad weather, how they met some unusual people, and a lot of other fairy tale nonsense. Daniel was growing up, and questions about his dad became fewer and fewer. In the last year and a half, he hadn't asked about him at all. But Marta still worried constantly because his classmates might say something about their dads, triggering new questions about his own father. Fortunately, this hadn't happened to her. Perhaps it was because she was familiar with Daniel's friends' moms, and these moms, knowing Marta's situation, asked their children not to bring up the topic of dads around Daniel. Or maybe she was just lucky. But she knew that in the next few years, she would still have to have a serious conversation with her son. Marta even consulted a psychologist for advice on how to handle it. She received various psychological techniques, but she hadn't found the right approach. "Mom, look, we're above the clouds." The boy marveled at the flight. She looked at her son and remembered their flight with Basilio and Daniel. The boy had been sitting on Basilio's lap, calmly gazing out the window. Other children were screaming throughout the cabin, yet Daniel sat quietly on his father's lap. Marta had been looking at them then, unable to contain her joy at such family harmony. She couldn't have imagined that such a family flight with her son would be their last. A year and a half later, Marta and Basilio flew for a vacation, but without Daniel. By that time, misunderstandings and suspicions had begun to arise between Marta and Basilio, and the purpose of that vacation trip was to reconcile. However, instead of getting closer, they drifted further apart after the vacation. Marta called the flight attendant and asked for some water. She really didn't want to return to memories of her husband, but her memory played a cruel trick on her. Marta started to feel anxious again. She was even mad at herself for breaking her own resolution to start a new life. But it was okay, she had to keep trying. Marta drank the water, closed her eyes, and tried to fall asleep. "Mom, I need to go to the bathroom," her son woke her up. "Shall I walk you?" "Well, Mom, I'm old enough to find the restroom on the plane by myself. I'm already 8 years old. Besides, the flight attendant showed me where it is before takeoff." "You're such a smart one," Marta said and let her son pass through. She watched Daniel with her eyes as he confidently walked to the front of the plane, where a flight attendant greeted him and pointed to the restroom. Marta made sure he reached his destination, then looked out the window. The plane had long reached its cruising altitude and was flying smoothly, but after a minute, a voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are approaching a turbulence zone, and there might be some light shaking in the plane. Please remain calm. The situation is under control and the turbulence will end in a minute." Before the pilot could finish these routine words, the plane began to shake. "Daniel, my boy," Marta thought about her son, he might be scared. She got up from her seat, intending to go to the restroom, but a female voice from behind interrupted her. "Sonora, please sit back in your seat. We are in a turbulence zone and safety regulations require it." The flight attendant was trying to guide Marta back to her seat, but she interrupted. "My son is there. I need to go." "Don't worry, he will be fine." At that moment, Daniel emerged from the restroom. He walked calmly back to his seat, but suddenly stopped. After a brief pause, he started walking faster. When he got really close, Marta saw his pale, frightened face. "Mom," he said with a trembling voice. "Daniel, what's wrong? Are you scared?" "It's just turbulence. There's nothing to be afraid of." Marta decided that her son's fear was likely caused by the sudden turbulence. "Mom," Daniel repeated almost in a whisper, "Dad is sitting with some lady over there." Marta quickly let her son pass to his seat. "Sweetie, what are you saying? You probably imagined it." "No, I definitely saw him. He just had a different hairstyle, but it was him. Go and see. You're probably very tired from the long flight. Just try to sleep. Let's recline your seat, and you'll fall asleep." "Don't you believe me?" "Why wouldn't I believe you?" "I do. It's just that there are so many people on the ground, and some of them can look very similar, so you probably saw someone who looks like him." "I'm sure it was him," the boy said, folding his hands and staring out of the window. Marta understood that trying to convince her son was pointless. Moreover, it was hard for her to maintain a calm, casual tone. Pretending that everything was fine for her son's sake, she was feeling far more anxiety than Daniel. She tried to convince herself that there was no way Basilio could be there. Perhaps some memories from that childhood flight had resurfaced in Daniel's mind, and that's why he thought he saw his father. One might think it would be quite simple to check, just stand up, walk to the restroom, and come back. But Marta hesitated to do it. What if there really was someone there who looked very much like Basilio? That could completely unsettle her. For the rest of the flight, Marta stayed seated. She even feared turning her head towards the aisle again. After an hour and a half, the plane began its descent, and after 20 more minutes, it landed safely. Passengers jumped from their seats and started retrieving their belongings from the overhead bins, even before the plane had come to a full stop at the gate. Marta didn't belong to this group of perpetually hurried people and didn't want to stand dressed in the aisle with her son for another 5 minutes. She decided to wait while the door opened and most of the passengers disembarked. Marta calmly sat and watched the people standing up. At that moment, a person in one of the front rows got up from their seat and reached for their belongings. Marta immediately realized that this was the man Daniel thought was his father. The person did look incredibly similar to Basilio, only with a slightly rounder face and shorter hair. He reached for his hat, and Marta saw a mole under his chin. This can't be real, she thought. No, it's a dream, a bizarre coincidence. I don't want to believe this, it's just nonsense. Marta was trembling. It was very difficult for her to hide her emotions, but she did it for the sake of her son. Meanwhile, the man put on his wide hat, took the blonde girl's hand, and also stood up in the aisle. The hat once again obscured his face from Marta's view. People began to leave, and after a couple of minutes, she told Daniel to get ready. Marta intentionally waited even longer than usual so as not to accidentally cross paths with the man. As they exited the plane via the air stairs, she couldn't avoid the airline employee standing at the registration desk. Marta understood that this girl was responsible for another flight, but she needed to let out some emotions and work through the situation a bit. "Excuse me, can I find out if one person was on the same flight with me?" "Sonora, I'm sorry, but I'm expecting a different flight." "Theoretically, you can still access the database. It's the same airline, after all." "Theoretically, I could, but then I'd violate the personal data law." "Miss, please understand my situation." Perhaps, Marta leaned in close to the airline worker's ear and continued quietly, so Daniel wouldn't hear. "My husband was flying there, who disappeared without a trace several years ago." The girl first looked at Marta, then at Daniel. Apparently, the child's gaze managed to break through her determination, and she decided to bend the rules. The girl typed something on her screen and said, "Give me the last name and first name." "Alvarez Basilio." "Such a person didn't fly on your flight." "That's it, I'm really sorry, but I ask you to step away and not tell anyone about what I just did." "Yes, of course," Marta replied, flustered, "I'm sorry." She took Daniel's hand and slowly headed towards the baggage claim area. Marta looked at the black conveyor belt, on which suitcases were moving leisurely. Out of the corner of her eye, she noticed the man with the hat again. He had already retrieved his baggage and was heading towards the exit with his companion. How good it is that it's not him, Marta thought, otherwise, I don't know what I would have done. Coincidences like these really happen. But the mole. No, I need to forget all this as soon as possible and focus on the vacation. After collecting their suitcase, mother and son left the airport and took a taxi to the hotel. Marta liked their room. The balcony offered a wonderful view of the sea. She stepped out onto the balcony, took a deep breath, and mentally let go of the situation that had unfolded today. The new life continues. Ahead are many days of relaxation, sun, and sea, and no random encounters can ruin that for me anymore, Marta thought as she entered the room and lay down on the spacious bed. The first 3 days of the vacation for Marta and her son went splendidly. The weather was delightful, there were always available sunbeds on the beaches. The only annoyance was occasionally hearing someone arguing from neighboring rooms at night, but that didn't prevent Marta or her son from falling asleep. In the evenings, Marta loved standing on the balcony and gazing out at the sea. It was like her daily meditation. She found solace in watching the sun set in the distance over the water. On the evening of the 4th day, Marta, as usual, stepped out onto the balcony. It was cloudy that day, and enjoying the sunset wouldn't be possible. Marta was about to leave when she suddenly heard the occupants of the room one floor below stepping onto their balcony. They were speaking in high tones, and Marta guessed it was the same couple that argued at night. "Dora, is there anything in life that interests you other than money?" the man asked loudly. "Of course, but in order for something to interest me, I need to be provided for first," the girl shouted in response. Marta decided to stay. Not that she enjoyed eavesdropping, but this time she was curious about how far the audacity of the young girl could go. Besides, the male voice seemed familiar to her. "And am I not providing for you?" the man continued to ask. "Are you making fun of me? You took me to this dump in some forgotten corner of Thailand. And I need the Maldives, Bali. Do you understand? Well, Dora, it's not a dump. It's a 4-star hotel. What those sugar daddies entertained you with in the Maldives, it was just because they wanted your body. And do you need something else? Of course, I'm trying to teach you something, explain something, make you a little smarter. You're such a bore after all. You act like an old grumpy man, even though you're a young guy." "I'm old?" "Well, okay," the male voice lowered slightly. "But I'll reveal a secret to you. You're not getting any younger either, and with time, what wealthy guys are chasing after will fade away. And what will be left? You'll be a 40-year-old lady with the mind of a 12-year-old girl." Marta froze. When the man's voice got quieter, she realized that it was her husband Basilio. No, he couldn't be mistaken for anyone else. She didn't recognize him immediately simply because she had rarely seen her husband shouting. All their fights and misunderstandings occurred either quietly or in silence. Sometimes silence can affect a person much more powerfully than shouting, and in Marta and Basilio's marriage, both partners understood that. But when the man one floor below said, "And what will be left?" Marta had no more doubts. It was Basilio's favorite phrase. He used it in every argument, as if asking his conversation partner, "If you don't agree with me now, what will be left?" But for today's interlocutor, this tactic didn't seem to have any effect. She burst out laughing loudly. "What? Do you even hear yourself? In my 40s, I'll look better than all your past and future girls combined," she said through laughter and walked out onto the balcony, slamming the door loudly. The presumed Basilio stood for a moment longer, then opened the door, said something, and entered the room. Marta was in shock. She wanted to listen to that voice a bit more to be absolutely sure of her suspicions. "Daniel, I have some things to do. I'll be back soon," Marta told her son, stepping out from the balcony. She headed to the entrance door, dashed into the corridor, called the elevator, which took its sweet time arriving. Frustrated, Marta dashed to the stairs, descended one floor, and found the exact room located directly beneath theirs and Daniel's room. Forgetting all about decency, Marta pressed her ear to the door. To what lengths can female curiosity drive a person? The couple continued to argue. "Aren't you afraid I might just leave you right now?" "Where are you going to go, Dora?" "Anywhere. Are there not enough wealthy guys here in Thailand? There will definitely be ones richer than you. Later, you will regret your words. But frankly, I don't care anymore. Go wherever and to whomever you want. I couldn't care less about you and your guys. You're such a pathetic old beggar. You'll be crawling back to me to apologize first. You'll be on your knees begging me to come back. You can think whatever you want. No one is going to crawl after you. Look at this false princess." "Oh, really? Then goodbye," the girl said and walked loudly to the door. Marta barely managed to press herself against the wall. The girl burst out of the room and hurried to the elevator, not noticing Marta. "What am I even doing? Standing against the wall, hiding from a couple I eavesdropped on for a few minutes. What a disgrace." Marta chided herself. But emotionally, she understood that all this eavesdropping was justified. Such coincidences don't happen. First the plane, then the mole, and now the voice. Either Marta was losing her mind, or her deceased husband was really behind that door. Yet if she had only noticed Basilio in that man, it could be attributed to a clouded mind. But Daniel recognized Basilio too, and you can't fool children. Of course, some children have imaginary friends, but Daniel wasn't one of them. If he said he saw something, then he really did. Marta decided to step away and walk down to the end of the corridor. She needed to catch her breath after such an experience, but she couldn't rest for long. The room door opened, and a man walked out. Marta barely managed to turn toward the window to avoid revealing herself prematurely. In the window's reflection, she saw the man swipe his keycard and head to the elevator. When he reached the elevator, Marta decided to follow him. She reached the staircase, quickly descended, and hoped to catch up to the elevator. And she succeeded. She and the man reached the first floor almost simultaneously. Marta looked after him. If you subtract a couple of extra kilograms and a few gray hairs on his head, he would be a spitting image of Basilio. The man was in a t-shirt and shorts, so it wasn't difficult for Marta to visually match him to her deceased husband. She followed him at a distance of 10 to 15 meters, not understanding the purpose of this surveillance, but something compelled her to continue. The man reached the bar, ordered a cocktail, and took a seat at the counter. Playing detective fascinated Marta more and more. She raised the collar of her blouse, tousled her hair, and put on the sunglasses that hung on her chest. Marta also approached the bar counter and, lowering her voice more than usual, ordered a mojito. She sipped on it for about 5 minutes while the Basilio-like man downed a few shots of tequila, washing them down with some cocktails. About 10 minutes later, the alcohol seemed to take effect. "Senorita, Tell me, Marta flinched, realizing that Basilio was addressing her, as there was no one else behind the bar counter. Why are women like that? The man fell silent, trying to find the right word. Like what? Marta asked in a low voice. Complicated, Basilio settled for the least offensive word. Probably, it only seems that way to you. There it is, female solidarity. You don't know anything about my situation but claim to know what seems to me. Well, I could guess, Marta replied, staring intently into her empty glass, afraid to turn her face toward the man. And what did you guess? Obviously, you had a fight with your girlfriend, maybe she even left you, insulted you, disrespected you. And now you're seeking support, looking for someone who would tell you that you're right, that she's an immature fool who doesn't understand anything about life. Marta, without hesitation, used the information she had overheard. Yes, you're quite perceptive. I'm even a bit surprised. Female intuition does exist, indeed. But I'll have to disappoint you. Why? I'm not the one who will tell you how great you are and how bad the girls are. Maybe in your case, the girl is really foolish, but you're not much smarter. Yet you're quite audacious. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. Marta didn't realize how she had shifted to being rude. No, please, explain to me what you mean. Marta sighed and understood that she would have to tell him what she really thought about men like Basilio. Well, no one forces you, men, to choose the young and foolish. You voluntarily leave the smart and mature women, cheat, and then complain that all they want from you is money. You read me like an open book. But you know, there are also hormones that make us choose the young ones. Sounds like a ridiculous excuse. The ability to overcome and control our animal instincts is what turned an ape into a human. And you're supposed to be human, right? Supposedly, yes. Well then, why tell these stories about hormones? Although, maybe I'm allowing myself too much. No, I actually asked you. Basilio ordered another shot and downed it in one gulp. Oh, and I've really had a lot now. Sorry, can I ask one more question? Go ahead. If you're so smart and know everything about everything, tell me, what should I do next? I have no idea. Control your hormones. Although, I think tomorrow or the day after, your young companion will return to you. What to do with her next is your choice. I'm not a psychologist. Maybe I should just send her where to get off. Maybe, Marta replied, not really understanding the point of this conversation. Some force of attraction to Basilio prevented her from just turning around and leaving. It demanded that she continue the conversation, despite the risk of exposure. Listen, have we ever met before? The man asked just as Marta was thinking about exposure. I don't think so. I'm here for the first time. Your voice tone is very familiar to me. Maybe you confused me with someone else. Marta snapped to her senses and decided to quickly leave. Okay, good luck on your personal front. I have to go. Will we meet again? Maybe. Marta left the bar and called the elevator. She understood that what saved her from exposure was the fact that Basilio was quite drunk. Yes, she no longer entertained the thought that this man might not be Basilio. If there was a chance before this conversation that her deceased husband might have had, for example, a similar-looking brother with a similar mole, now she was absolutely sure that this was no brother. Intonations, gaze, voice, mannerisms. Besides, she remembered how Basilio looked when he got tipsy. He never misbehaved, he just became a bit more talkative. And over the past 3 years, he hadn't changed his behavior with women. One day it was one, another day another. Today, he quarreled with his companion and immediately engaged in a pleasant conversation with Marta, same old nature. Now Marta had to decide what to do next. So, expose herself, why bother? And what would be left afterward, as Basilio might ask? Just to look him in the eyes? She had seen so much in them over the years of their relationship. But on the other hand, just out of curiosity. Why did he treat her like that? Could it be that the reason was that he wanted to smoothly transition to another family? But then he could have just left her. He didn't need to make her suffer for 3 years, longing and endlessly crying. Such a scoundrel he is, Marta thought as she entered the room. She herself didn't notice how her reaction to thoughts of Basilio had changed. If back on the plane, she trembled, barely held back a hysterical fit, wanted to run away, now she was completely calm and confident. She didn't want to announce herself as Basilio at any cost and as quickly as possible. The only thing bothering her was curiosity. Did anyone else from Basilio's past life know that he was alive? What was his name now? If the airport employee couldn't find him on the passenger lists. After these reflections, Marta had 2 options. The first one. Just be happy that the man was alive, not dead. Continue living a peaceful life, enjoy things, rest more, pamper herself. In a couple of years, tell her son that yes, his dad just left the family, and no one knows where he is. It's unclear what's worse for a child's psyche, the sadness of realizing that dad is dead, or the resentment of his betrayal. The second option seemed more preferable to Marta. Eventually, she would find another man who would replace Daniel, a father figure. The second option was to meet with Basilio, no longer hiding her identity. Then a difficult conversation, explanations, justifications would follow. Perhaps she would have to deal with yet another passion. But the main danger of this option was Marta's feelings. They might play a wicked trick on her, making her fall in love with Basilio all over again. But Marta rejected this option. One thing was to grieve for her tragically deceased husband, reminiscing about the happy moments of their life together. Another was to see a liar, a traitor, and a scoundrel in front of her. How could there be love for such a person? Marta still hadn't decided which option to choose. She looked at the sleeping Daniel, tucked him in better, and sighed deeply. The next day, Marta and her son were getting ready for the beach as usual. The weather had improved, and they needed to hurry to take their sunbeds. Only hotel guests were on this part of the beach, so there wasn't the usual hustle and bustle that you'd find at resorts, but in good weather, the sunbeds could be taken quickly. Marta stood in front of the mirror, deciding what to wear. She decided to play it safe and took a different pair of sunglasses, much wider and covering almost half of her face. In addition to the sunglasses, Marta put on a huge hat. She was protecting herself not only from the sun. If Basilio lived right below her, the probability of an accidental encounter was too high. Marta still hadn't decided whether to approach her former husband or not, so, for the time being, she kept up the disguise just in case. When ready, she took Daniel's hand and headed for the elevator. The cabin arrived only after a couple of minutes. Apparently, all the guests decided to go to the beach that morning. Marta and her son entered the elevator. The cabin stopped on the floor below, the doors opened, and the girl with dyed hair entered, Basilio's companion. This time, she stood without a phone and with a very disgruntled face. How much longer did I have to wait? People keep breeding, and then they hog the elevators, she said in a nasty tone. Young lady, what do you think you're doing? The elevator serves all floors. There are many hotel guests. I waited for it just the same way you did, Marta replied calmly. I don't care how long you waited. The girl looked Marta over with a snobbish gaze. Decked out in old wearing and still trying to tell me something. For some reason, Marta wasn't irritated at all by what Basilio's companion was saying. She was above responding with insults. Marta just covered Daniel's ears, and they silently rode to the first floor. The hotel lobby was crowded, and the rude girl immediately got lost in the crowd, which pleased Marta, as it was likely that Basilio's companion was heading to her ex-husband. Arriving at the beach, Marta realized she was right on 2 counts. Even yesterday evening, she told Basilio that the girl would come back to him. It turned out to be even faster than Marta had anticipated. Well, the girl was indeed heading to the beach to Basilio, whose duty, apparently, was to find available sunbeds. Ironically, 2 more vacant sunbeds were right next to the ones Basilio had found. They were just a couple of rows away, and if she wanted, Marta could see the people lying there and even hear their conversations. There was nothing to do. Marta didn't want to spoil her and her son's relaxation, so she carefully walked to the empty sunbeds, especially since she had no reason to fear exposure. She calmly sat up, applied sunscreen to Daniel, and lay down on the sunbed. She didn't have to wait long for something interesting to happen. The girl started scolding Basilio almost immediately. "Couldn't you find a place closer to the sea?" she exclaimed indignantly. "These were the closest ones. If you want to be closer to the sea, you have to get up earlier instead of dozing until 11. Oh, listen to who's talking. And who was drinking until 2 in the morning, wasn't it you? I didn't sleep, waiting for you, so I couldn't get up earlier. Let me remind you, my dear, that you left me yesterday. How was I supposed to know that you'd be back in the room after 2 hours? This will all be a lesson for you, so you'll fear losing me." Basilio didn't respond, but the girl didn't stop. "I'm doing him a favor, forgetting all the grievances, forgetting your lies, your insults. When did I insult you? And isn't this vacation an insult? This lousy hotel? Do you know how long I waited for that damn elevator today? I had to ride with some divorcee with trailer." After these words, Marta decided to stop listening to the couple's argument. She took off her hat and lowered her head. Nevertheless, their voices continued to reach her sunbed. "When will you stop being so angry?" Basilio replied quietly. "When will you stop being so? Ugh, who do you even resemble? Look at yourself." Marta carefully lifted her head and looked at Basilio. She was genuinely curious about who he resembled. Glancing at her ex-husband's face, she became slightly alarmed. Basilio looked pale, his eyes were darting around, and his hands seemed to be out of his control. Apparently, he did sit in the bar for a very long time yesterday. "Dora, I need to lie down," Basilio said and collapsed onto the sunbed unconscious. "Basilio!" the girl shouted. "What's wrong with you? Someone, please help him." In an instant, the girl's irritation turned into fear for Basilio. Her face showed genuine concern for her man. The source of this fear wasn't clear. Was the girl afraid of losing her beloved, or was she afraid of losing her source of financial support? But for Basilio, her fear was meaningless. Dora was just shouting in panic and not taking any real actions to help. That's when Marta jumped off her sunbed and rushed to Basilio. She checked his breathing and pulse. Basilio was breathing, but his pulse was weak. "Bring an umbrella to shield him from the sun," Marta commanded Dora. "What? What umbrella? Why?" The girl displayed a remarkable lack of wit in this emergency situation. "Fine, just go to the hotel and get a doctor. Quickly." The girl ran to the hotel, and Marta realized that she would have to provide first aid herself. The others on the beach were merely watching with curiosity. Marta bent Basilio's leg at the knee, turned him onto his side, and tilted his head back to open his airways. Then she ran to the sunbeds by the sea, grabbed a sunshade, and placed it next to Basilio. About 30 seconds later, he began to regain consciousness. He slowly opened his eyes and saw Marta, who was looking at him without sunglasses and a hat. "March. Marta, is that you?" Basilio asked incoherently. "It's me," Marta replied, realizing that she had completely forgotten about maintaining her disguise. At the same time, Dora returned from the hotel with a doctor. The physician approached Basilio, and Marta returned to her sunbed. She saw the doctor inject something into her ex-husband, check his pulse, and then address Dora. "Everything is fine. It's just a fainting spell, likely due to overheating. Right now, he needs to be taken to a cool room and allowed to rest." "How will I take him there?" The girl was surprised. "I'll walk on my own," Basilio whispered, got up from the sunbed, and looked around. He probably wanted to find Marta, but she had promptly put on her hat and sunglasses again and was out of Basilio's sight. Then he walked back to the hotel with his girlfriend. Marta remained lying on the beach. The situation had become even more complicated. Basilio knew that she had seen him, but they didn't get a chance to talk. Either he would dismiss it as delirium from fainting or he would search for her. Marta's desire to meet Basilio again had completely disappeared. She glanced at Daniel, who was engrossed in his phone, and pondered his reaction to his father. Basilio would almost certainly want to see his son, and perhaps even become involved in his upbringing. What had happened today had shown him clearly who it was better to be with: experienced, sensible women or foolish and mercenary girls. Marta didn't want Basilio to re-enter her life, or rather, she was very apprehensive about it, especially if he would start confessing and apologizing in front of her. Marta was compassionate enough to forgive a lot, but forgiving betrayal was too much, even for her. Marta packed her things and went to the hotel cafe to have lunch with her son. She saw traces of Basilio in every man sitting there. She couldn't eat properly due to her anxiety. She took Daniel's hand and led him back to the room. No sooner had she laid down on the bed than the phone rang. The phone was somewhere in the beach bag, and Marta couldn't find it there. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. Marta shouted, "Just a second," and continued searching for the phone. After a couple of seconds, the ringing stopped and the knocking on the door resumed. "What's going on? I told you to wait a bit." An irritated Marta went to the door and opened it. Basilio was standing in the corridor. Marta immediately closed the door. "Marta, wait." Basilio's voice could be heard from the corridor. Marta waited for a few seconds, thought, and then opened the door again. "How did you find me?" "I asked at the front desk which room my wife is staying in, and I gave them your name." "I'm not your wife," Marta sternly replied to her ex-husband's resourcefulness. "I understand what you're feeling right now, but let's talk, please. You don't understand anything. Give me a chance to explain something at least." "Not now, the child will hear." "How about tonight, in the hotel bar, at 10 o'clock? "Fine." Marta's curiosity ultimately got the better of her. "Please, come." Marta closed the door. Now she needed to mentally prepare herself for the conversation with her ex-husband, but she didn't know how. The remaining time before the conversation was agonizing for her. What would Basilio tell her? What story would he come up with? Would she have to believe a single word he said? Marta couldn't find answers to these questions. The only thing she decided was to be tough, unsentimental, and critical of everything she would hear. With these thoughts in mind, after putting Daniel to bed, she headed to the bar. Choosing an empty table in the back of the bar, where the music was least audible, Marta began to wait. 10 minutes later, Basilio appeared at the entrance. Marta didn't give any signals to help him locate her faster. The man carefully navigated the bar and reached the farthest table. "Well, hello, Marta," Basilio said with a guilty tone. "We've already seen each other," Marta curtly interrupted. "Have you already ordered something?" "No." "Did you come here to drink?" "It will be easier to talk this way." "I'm getting something now." Basilio headed to the bar, ordered 2 cocktails, and brought them to the table. "Did the doctors already give you permission to drink?" "I think it's better to hold off after that fainting spell." "I got a non-alcoholic one." "Oh, by the way, thank you for helping me today on the beach. If it weren't for you, I don't know if she would have thought of calling a doctor." "You're welcome. But don't you care about your health? Hangover and heat. You know, I've stopped paying much attention to my well-being lately. Maybe I need to be more attentive. After all, I'm not 18 anymore." No, why would you? You've been dead for a long time, and a dead person doesn't need health. "Marta," Basilio sighed heavily, "I'm going to start talking now, and please, don't interrupt me, just listen, I'm asking you." "I'll try." "So, 3 years ago, I started receiving threats. Our company crossed paths with a very serious organization. It all started with me taking out a loan for our new project. Not from a bank, of course. The bank wouldn't give anything under those conditions, so I turned to this shady organization. We signed an agreement. They transferred a very large sum to our account, but the contractor we chose didn't fulfill his obligations and disappeared. Then, as they said, their representatives were seen in Thailand, but that's not important. I went to the credit organization, explained the situation, but, of course, no one listened to me. I was given a month to repay the debt. We went to the police, but they said they couldn't help because both this organization and the contractor were operating unofficially. Since then, they started calling me, sending emails. I was afraid they would come to our house. They demanded the money back. But how could I find such an amount in a month? With each passing day, the threats came more often, and I decided to get away. After spending a couple of weeks there, I was already planning to return when the security guard of the resort where I was staying told me that a group of young athletic-looking people had been asking about me. I realized they had found me. I had nowhere to run. They would catch up with me at the airport, at the train station, or even here, at the resort. I was in a state of confusion. It felt like everything was over. My life was finished. I remember I ran into some forest and miraculously found a signal there, so I called our CEO, Alberto. I remember that conversation very well. At first, he interrupted me and told me that you had called, asking about my whereabouts. I'm really sorry, but I couldn't inform you. In any case, I told him everything. That's when we came up with the plan to stage my death. We often rode snowmobiles there in Norway, and we decided to use that. I informed the company employees I was with that. We needed to spread news of my death and somehow sort out matters with the rescue team. Alberto was supposed to spread the news throughout the company and, well, also visit you. How could you? Marta whispered. I was saving lives, not just mine. They could have pressured me through you. Basilio took a sip of his cocktail and continued. Alberto promised that he would help you. He did help. Well, there you go, at least that. At least that? Do you think some money, some inheritance, could ease my suffering? I haven't lived for 3 years, you understand? This is my first vacation in all this time. I'm sorry, but I didn't have a choice, understand? You could have left the country with us, hide somewhere. Why did you choose the cruelest path? They would have tracked you down even abroad, and besides, I was in such a situation that I couldn't just leave anywhere. I was practically cornered. You could have told about your problems right away, not wait for a critical point. I didn't want to burden you. We had a little child, so I didn't want to add unnecessary fears to you. You remembered the child. How many times have you seen him in the last year of your life? It hurts me deeply. Over these 3 years, I realized how much I missed my son. How do you manage that? Marta exclaimed. You come out of everything unscathed, feeling hurt, weak. I realized I wanted what was best. I didn't want to burden. But if you missed your son so much, why didn't you let us know you were alive? I couldn't do that. The danger persisted. I couldn't show up in the city at all, and phones could be tapped. And I couldn't even imagine how you would react to a call from the other side. How noble of you to leave your wife in mourning for 3 years with a little child. I hoped you would forget me quickly. Our relationship was far from ideal by that time. I wonder, whose fault was that? I admit I'm at fault, including for what happened with our relationship. And what am I supposed to do about it? Jump for joy into your arms? No need to be ironic. I'm really in a bad place. All right. What happened next? Well, then there were 2 years of continuous running. I changed my last name, lived in different cities, but I never found a place for myself anywhere. With great relief, I got the news that the financial organization I owed money to was liquidated, and its management, employees, and enforcers were arrested. I immediately came back to our city and, with the help of old connections, started a new business. The profit is small, but it's enough to live on. Did you ever think of us, of Daniel, after you came back? I remembered, more than once. But, honestly, I was absolutely sure that you had forgotten about me by that time, so I didn't think about reaching out. I decided that there's no longer a Basilio Alvarez. Now there's a new Basilio Santos with a new business and a new personal life. You changed your last name from Alvarez to Santos? Yes, I thought it was a wonderful idea. Quite original, Marta chuckled. I sometimes remembered your laughter. Stop it, I can't hear this. Don't play the suffering husband and father here. He remembered. And when you started going on your endless vacations, leaving me alone, did you also remember my laughter? Like I said, I'm guilty before you. I was a complete idiot. Well, it's good that you admit it. But your regrets won't erase the years of my pain. I don't know what your purpose was in talking to me anyway. First and foremost, I just wanted to explain. And second, to hear your forgiveness. So, you thought you would tell your heavy story about how you were threatened, that you had no choice, and I would be moved and forgive your infidelity and betrayal? Basilio didn't know how to answer. He looked at his empty glass and was about to go get another. He stood up slightly, then immediately sat back down. What's going on? Marta wondered. Why did Basilio suddenly seem unwell again? It's going to get loud in a moment. Please, don't pay attention to anything and don't listen. At first, Marta didn't understand the words her ex-husband had said, but a moment later, Basilio's current girlfriend, Dora, approached their table. Oh, there you are, you scoundrel. Knew you'd run to the bar with other women. She said loudly and slapped Basilio. Dora, you're misunderstanding everything. I've known everything about you for a while. You're not a real man. You can't provide for me and you're running to other women. Dora looked at Marta. Oh, you. Do you even know that she has a trailer? I saw them in the elevator. She wants to use you, idiot. Dora, stop immediately. No, let her continue. Marta joined the conversation. You're such a... Oh, and you're trying to be rude, huh? Dora turned to Marta and tried to grab her hair, but Basilio intervened in time, pulled his girlfriend back, and seated her next to him. Let me go, right now. Calm down. Basilio said loudly. She's not to blame for anything. She's to blame for stealing other women's men. Dora wasn't planning to calm down. You're absolutely right, Marta continued, provoking the girl. That's exactly why I came to this bar, to steal your precious man. Such a faithful, devoted, and honest person can't be found anymore. So, you missed your chance in the unequal struggle against me. Marta, where are you going? Basilio tried to calm down his ex-wife. Let me go, I'll rip all her curls out. Dora screamed. That's enough, Dora, this is my ex-wife. The girl immediately calmed down. Ex-wife? The one you left many years ago? Yes, her, Basilio answered with a slight awkwardness, avoiding eye contact. Left many years ago, Marta was intrigued by that phrasing. I'd even say he vanished, or even better, he drowned. Basilio didn't react to this. Of course, he hadn't shared all his adventures with his new girlfriend. Wait, Dora was surprised. What about that child I saw her with? Is he yours? Mine. But you said you didn't have any children? I lied. Dora fell silent for a moment, needing to process what she had just heard. Don't worry, Marta addressed her calmly. He has very little to do with this child, just biologically. The boy has almost forgotten his father. So, you can consider that he didn't lie. Marta, Basilio tried to explain himself. How could I not have guessed right away what a monster you are? Dora interrupted Basilio. You left your wife, your child, and you'll leave me the same way. That's it, I can't see you anymore, goodbye. Dora jumped up and ran out of the bar. Basilio ran after her. Marta was left alone with her unfinished cocktail. Could she have imagined just a week ago how this first vacation in many years would turn out? After such a holiday, they say you'll need another one. So many events to contemplate for a long time. But internally, she felt relieved. Firstly, Basilio was alive. Yes, he's a scoundrel, a cheater, and a liar, but he's alive. Secondly, Marta realized that the period of mourning in her life had ended. New challenges would arise now, Daniel's questions about his father. But all of this was just everyday challenges, not tragedies. At the very least, Marta's life would become much more interesting than before. That's why she didn't pay attention to the screams, insults, and attempts to grab her hair from that fiery girl, because she understood that a new phase of her life had begun, and the past would never return, not even in memories. Marta stood up and leisurely left the bar. She wanted to take a walk in the fresh air. The hotel courtyard was empty by now. Everyone was either in their rooms or in the bars and restaurants. Inhaling the warm air, Marta felt that she had become free. The shackles of mourning were broken. She strolled to a small park and saw Basilio sitting on a bench. Judging by your expression, you couldn't catch up to her, Marta said and sat down next to her ex-husband. I managed to catch her, but I think she's gone from me this time for good. She's packing her things from the room now. Why did you even need this kindergarten of yours? You two never had a moment of peace. I heard all the details of your relationship every night. I don't know, something was holding me back. She's young, I'm not that much anymore. I wanted that youthful energy, fun. Did you have fun? Don't even ask, Basilio replied, waving his hand. Listen, I don't want to scold you anymore, especially since you already know everything about yourself quite well. But tell me, don't you feel sorry for yourself? What do you mean? Well, look, you've been running somewhere all your life, trying to chase after money, got threats on your life, which forced you to stage your own death, tried to chase after happiness in your personal life, got this naive, loud girl. You're not that old yet, but you're already fainting from hangovers. Why did you need all of this? Where did you end up? You know, over the last few years, I've been close to asking myself this question directly, but each time I ran from it with simple excuses. Money? Well, of course, you can never have too much of it. It gives you freedom, security. Though in my case, it turned out to be the opposite. Relationships? They bring new energy, young blood, more vitality, joy. And here it's a miss. I don't know, I'm completely lost. But you drove yourself into this state. You lost yourself, really lost. But right now, you're pitying yourself in the wrong way. What do you mean by that? Well, look, you have this destructive self-pity, and it's utterly useless. If anything, it's more likely to bury you deeper. You're not pitying yourself, you're just beating yourself up. Productive self-pity should sound like this: yes, my mistakes got me into a tough situation, but I'm strong enough to reconsider my principles and try to rebuild everything. Something like that. Marta didn't notice how her anger towards Basilio vanished. She saw a weak, uncertain person, absolutely harmless. She even felt the urge to help him somehow. For a moment, she was even scared that these feelings were resurfacing. That's what she feared when she first saw her ex-husband. But no, pity and love were entirely different things, although sometimes it's hard to distinguish them. And Marta felt only pity. Marta, thank you. For what? At some point during our conversation at the bar, I thought you were just going to slap me, turn around, and run away. Thank you for not doing that. I actually had that thought, Marta smirked, but curiosity got the best of me. By the way, how weren't you afraid to come back to the city at all? You had so many acquaintances, friends there, Daniel and I could have noticed you, after all. I lived not right in the city, but in a cottage community nearby. I rarely appeared in the city center, mostly worked remotely, and went into the city only by car. And then I changed my image and last name drastically. It seemed like it was enough. And indeed, until I met you, my cover held up successfully. At our first meeting, it was holding up pretty well. Marta remembered the first time she saw Basilio at the airport, but the wide-brimmed hat prevented her from recognizing her ex-husband. If it weren't for Daniel, maybe we wouldn't be sitting here now. Did he recognize me? Yes, I didn't expect that. I hoped he had forgotten all about it. Basilio sighed heavily. Marta, I want to meet with him. Why do you want that? I understand that I will never be a real father to him again, but I really want to see him. You said I can rebuild everything. Please, give me this chance. Marta didn't know how to respond to Basilio. Perhaps now, while Daniel was still quite young and hadn't reached adolescence yet, it was the right time to reintroduce his father's presence into his life. But Marta was afraid of taking such decisive steps. She had grown used to raising Daniel on her own. I don't know. This meeting might be very difficult for him. I get it. I'll try to be as sensitive as possible. Fine, but let's do it this way. I'll prepare him in the morning, warn him about you. Then we'll meet, talk a bit. After the meeting, I'll talk to him alone again, and only if he wants to see you again, we'll figure out what to do next. Of course. How about tomorrow at 11 at the Hotel Cafe? Yes, just remember, for Daniel, you're a traveler who explored new lands. That's an interesting cover story you came up with. Okay, I understand. Marta bid farewell and went to her room. She tossed and turned and couldn't fall asleep until the early morning. It was hard for her to imagine how the meeting would go tomorrow, how Daniel would react, how Basilio would hold up. There were too many unpredictable factors. And maybe her son simply wouldn't want to see his dad again? In these thoughts, Marta lay until her alarm rang. She set it for 10 in the morning to have time to prepare and explain everything to Daniel. Mom, are we going somewhere today? Her son asked, watching his mom apply makeup. Yes, Marta turned to Daniel. Remember the passenger on the plane you called Dad? Well, you were right, he really turned out to be your dad. Can you believe it? He came back from his trip. I told you. I told you. The boy rejoiced. And are we going to see him today? Yes, he'll be very happy to see you. And I'll be happy to see him too. Marta was pleased with her son's reaction. The idea of having a father interested him, so psychologically, this meeting should have been easier for Daniel than it could have been otherwise. Where has he been all this time? The boy asked. He'll tell you himself. As the time approached 11 o'clock, Marta and her son left their room. She was getting more and more nervous. Was it too late to cancel the meeting? Maybe it should stay as it was before. No, there was no turning back. Marta had already told Daniel everything, and a sudden cancellation of the meeting would cause the very psychological trauma his mother had been worried about. Marta and her son reached the cafe located on the hotel's ground floor. Basilio was already sitting inside. Seeing his ex-wife and son, he got up and walked over to them. Dad, Daniel said loudly and also went towards Basilio. Hello, my boy, Basilio said, hugging his son. Marta greeted her ex-husband, and they all sat down together at the table. So, tell me, how you doing? Basilio turned to his son. We're having fun. It's so cool here. Mom and I are on such a great trip for the first time. You're doing great. And I kept thinking about you all the time, the boy continued sharing his impressions. Marta looked at him with surprise. Really? And I thought about you too. Really. Only, I saw that Mom wasn't very happy when I started asking about you. I think it's because she worried a lot about you, so I tried not to talk about you in front of her, just thought about you. So, where have you been all this time? Me? Well, your mom probably told you something. Basilio was holding back tears with all his might. I was far away and couldn't come to you. It's my job, you understand? Traveling to different cities, villages, forests, lakes, exploring dangerous territories. This job requires constant presence, and we, travelers, see our families very rarely. Why don't you quit this job so that Mom and I can see you more often? But someone has to do it. Then let those who have no one to come to, who nobody is waiting for, do it. Basilio realized he couldn't hold back his emotions any longer. He pretended to receive an urgent phone call and rushed to the restroom. Yes, in such situations, even men sometimes need to have a good cry. You see, Daniel, what a stressful job Dad has, Marta said, staying alone with her son. Even during his vacation, they keep calling and distracting him. But why does he need such a job? The boy protested. Everyone has their calling. A couple of minutes later, Basilio returned. Please forgive me, I had to step away. We were actually talking about your stressful and lengthy job that prevents you from spending time with your son. Marta steered the conversation towards the main topic, Basilio's future involvement in raising Daniel. Yes, regarding work, Basilio stumbled slightly. You know, Daniel, I've quit that job just now, over the phone. Really? Hooray! So, will we get to see each other more now? The boy asked excitedly. Yes, we'll definitely see each other more often. Basilio glanced at Marta. Well, if your mom doesn't mind, of course. Mom, can you be against this? Daniel was surprised. Absolutely not. Of course, I won't be against it. But how often you'll see each other will depend a lot on your dad. I promise that we'll see each other as often as possible, Basilio firmly said to his son. And why can't you just come and live with us like before? Basilio didn't know what to answer Daniel. He looked at his ex-wife in bewilderment. Marta tried to get out of the awkward situation. Well, because your dad will gradually have to start a new life, find a new job, and he won't have enough time to be with us all the time. And then, when he finds it, he will, right? Daniel put Marta and Basilio in an even more awkward position. We don't know what will happen then, we'll see when the time comes. Marta avoided the question. Basilio, Marta, and Daniel continued to sit at the table for a while and chat. They discussed vacations, the sea, and travels, talked about their lives, and made plans for the future. The day didn't end with breakfast at the cafe. They all went to the beach together. Basilio even started teaching his son how to swim. They seemed to understand each other without words, and even with his mom, Daniel's learning process didn't have the same enthusiasm. Marta watched all of this and reminisced about the times when she and Basilio had just started their relationship and when Daniel was born. It was a pleasant nostalgia, but Marta quickly regained her composure. It wasn't so easy to forget Basilio's actions, his betrayals, and deceit. While it was great that he got along well with their son, she needed to maintain a distance to avoid stepping on the same rake again, despite the fact that Basilio had changed significantly during that time. As the evening approached, the three of them went for a walk around the city. From Marta's perspective, Basilio and Daniel looked like a genuinely happy family. As it got darker, they headed back to the hotel. After saying goodbye by the elevator, Marta and Daniel entered their room. So, did you like spending time with Dad? Marta inquired. Very much. I want us to spend every day like this together. Not every day, we're leaving tomorrow. What, tomorrow already? Yes, with all these adventures, Marta seemed to have forgotten that their vacation was coming to an end. Too bad. Are we flying back with Dad? No, he'll fly later. We'll meet him next time in our city. Waiting again? Don't worry, this time you'll have to wait much less, Marta answered with hope. Mom, why can't you two live together like before? I've explained to you, it's life. Sometimes we have to choose things we don't like. Your dad had to take this path, but things will change for us anyway. We'll go on trips like this more often, meet your dad more frequently. You'll like it. Okay, yawning, the boy said and went to his bed. Marta also lay down shortly afterward, but after a few minutes, the phone rang. Marta quietly went out onto the balcony and closed the door tightly so as not to wake her son. Hello, Marta, is that you? Basilio's voice came through the receiver. Yes, you still have my number? As you can see. So, how's Daniel? Did you talk to him? I did, he's happy. That's great. So, shall we repeat the walk tomorrow? No, we're flying out tomorrow. I almost forgot about it myself. Luckily, the reminder on my phone worked. Ah, so soon. I'm only arriving in 3 days. Can't we meet up tomorrow at all? In the morning, just briefly. But just the two of us. I told Daniel that you'll meet next time after we arrive. Why did you rush like that? He's already overwhelmed with impressions from today. I think it's better to gradually reestablish contact. You're probably right. Where shall we meet? Let's meet in the park, in the hotel courtyard. Okay then, good night and see you tomorrow. This time, Marta fell asleep quickly, despite the upcoming conversation with her ex-husband. The sleepless night before and the eventful days seemed to catch up with her. Mom, where are you going? Half asleep, Daniel asked, seeing his mom getting ready to leave again. I have some things to take care of, quickly. Sleep, sleep. Marta quickly left the room, took the elevator to the first floor, and went out into the hotel courtyard. Basilio hadn't arrived yet. Why did I come out so early? Marta thought. I should have been late. I've just added more nerve-wracking minutes to myself. But the wait wasn't long. Basilio entered the park quite soon, wearing a light suit and his wide-brimmed hat. Hey, have you been waiting for me for long? No, just a couple of minutes. Listen, since we're facing another break, not as long, of course, just a couple of days, but still a break, I wanted to ask you something. Have you been able to forgive me after all? Yes, I have, Marta answered calmly. I rarely hold grudges for long. And what's there to be upset about? Your weakness? Weakness is not a crime. So you can live peacefully. I'm not holding any grudges against you. You're a very wise woman. I couldn't sleep for a long time. I kept thinking about Daniel and you. Remember he asked why we can't live together again? I remember. He asked me the same question again yesterday evening. So, maybe he's right after all? If you've forgiven me, if things have worked out well with Daniel, why don't we start over? What do you think about that? Are you willing? No, Marta answered after a brief pause. How difficult it was for her to utter that word. The opportunity to recreate their past family happiness was so tempting. Her feelings for Basilio flared up once again, but she held herself back. Marta remembered the warnings she gave herself on the beach, not to step into the same trap. A hasty yes could be just that trap. Everything was spiraling too quickly and unexpectedly. In reality, she had only known the new Basilio for a few days. That wasn't enough for serious commitments and shared life. And forgiving, which she had granted Basilio, didn't automatically mean the possibility of starting a new relationship. Forgiving was one thing, preventing new hurt was quite another. Basilio didn't argue with Marta's refusal. He shook his head and said, I understand your answer. If I were in your place, I wouldn't have forgiven myself either. But thank you for even considering it. The main thing is that my refusal won't affect the fact that the child has his father again. Don't worry about that. As soon as I arrive, I'll come straight to you. Please, let me know when you arrive, and then stay in touch. Okay. Don't disappear either. I won't this time. Marta needed to return to her room and prepare for the trip to the airport. Both she and Basilio clearly wanted to embrace each other in farewell, but they refrained. Perhaps by saying no, Marta had made the most difficult choice in her life. She had always been an accommodating person, even from early childhood, and by firmly overcoming her emotions, Marta proved to herself that she was strong and independent from feelings. Already turning around, she heard Basilio call out to her. Wait. Something else? Yes. Tell me, please, is your refusal final, or is there still a chance left for me? Time's gone show, Marta replied and quickly headed back to the hotel. Already in the elevator, tears welled up in her eyes. No, these were not tears of a sad farewell to Basilio, as in just a few days they would see each other again. These were tears of joy. Joy from new experiences, from new pages of life. During these vacation days, Marta had learned to approach life differently, manage her emotions and feelings, find a father for her child, yet not fall into mindless, naive relations with Basilio. Such a balance could only be maintained by a wise woman, and that's exactly what Marta had become during these warm summer days.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe.